This photo, if you can join me in taking a look at your screen, shared by the House DFL caucus yesterday, is potentially one of the last showing Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark alive. This photo taken Friday night at the Humphrey Mondale dinner at the Minneapolis Hilton. It was a celebration of the end of the legislative session. Roughly 1,000 people or so were told, organized by the DFL party. The couple you see there smiling beautifully for that photograph, and then killed a handful of hours after it was taken in their Brooklyn Park home. Heartbreaking, to say the very least. Joining us now is someone who has spoke with Representative Hortman often, many times, Fox 9 political analyst Blois Olson. Blois, it hasn't quite sunk in for a lot of us. It's still, disbelief. But just your reaction. I know you speak with Representative Hortman frequently.
Yeah, I've known Representative Hortman for 20 years, since she served. When she was in her first term, we met, got to know each other. When I've reflected on this, there's so many thoughts. I think what I want to highlight, just for viewers and people who watch us Sundays, is that these people serve just the way a police officer serves or a member of the military serves. They're in public service, and we need to understand that their whole family serves. One of the most touching stories I heard recently, just last night, was that the Hortman's son got engaged recently, and he did it on the House floor, and he wanted to because he was in his 20s, and the House had become part of their family. When he was little, he would go visit his mom there, and so he chose to propose to his fiance on the House floor, and it was his mom who orchestrated it all. And I think that should symbolize and illustrate what a family affair public service is. And then just finally, I would just say that we cannot lose sight of the sacrifice this is. We have to be mindful of this. And the one smirk I've had is that Speaker Emeritus Hortman had one of the driest, straightforward senses of humor that you would ever get. And I had her on my radio show last Sunday, and she texted me after with a couple of quips that were meant to, make sure I knew what was important in the interview, but also reminding me that I wasn't always on the right side of asking the questions either.
Yeah, and that's, you and I, it is a privilege to be able to talk with these folks that are leaders within our community, but also get to know the personal side of just their day-to-day lives when they're willing to share those nuggets and remind us that we are all human. As far as her, her career in politics and the legacy that she leaves behind and the work that she's done, just reflect on that for us. It's massive.
Well, let's just start with that she's the longest serving speaker in Minnesota history. I would say that, you look at the 2023 session, navigating the different dynamics of the caucus, getting us through this past session as a tie. When I had she and Leader Dameth on the show last Sunday, I ended with a question, and we'll replay it this week, of, you guys have spent a lot of time together. What have you learned about each other that's not political? And they talked about clothes and gardening and things like that. But I look, Melissa Hortman should be remembered as a giant, probably as influential in our state as any governor, probably most members of Congress, and maybe some U.S. senators. She is a giant who should be remembered that way. And I think the other piece to take from it is, even in the divided legislature, even when things got heated, she had a calm, very stoic demeanor to her that should be admired and modeled by leaders going forward.
And to that point, and it's so early in all of this, I want to acknowledge that still looking for the suspect, and the manhunt continues. The grieving process. We know there will be funerals for both her and her husband, but to think at some point the state has to look toward what's next and filling these massive shoes that she leaves behind. What does happen next politically?
You know, at some point there'll be a special election to fill the seat. And I think that's one of the things we just have to understand is part of it. There's another legislative session next year. There's the potential for a special session. And so I think there will be a special election. I think the governor will take his time in calling it. And obviously that will be itself a somber moment too, because no one chose to not be represented by Melissa Hortman other than this killer.
Yeah. All right, Blois, thank you. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.